I mean, listen, you can't say that I didn't make the effort. But if we're being honest with ourselves, I think it's pretty clear that I'm not the target audience for a movie like this. And you know what? That's okay. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it. Do it!
Wicked is the film adaptation of the world-famous Broadway musical of the same name. It follows the origins of the Wicked Witch of the West, a misunderstood green-skinned outcast who forges an unlikely friendship with Glinda. Following an encounter with the Wizard of Oz, their friendship soon reaches a crossroad as their lives begin to take very different paths. So I'm going to start this off by saying that I have zero knowledge of the original Broadway musical for obvious reasons. So I have no idea how accurate the movie version is to the original story, so I'm going to be judging it on its own merits. Also, it should be noted that I'm not the biggest fan of musicals. And no, not just because I suffered through Joker 2 earlier this year.
Get what you deserve!
Outside of the original Wizard of Oz and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, it's just not a genre of film that I tend to seek out. But I do know that the Wicked musical has a very strong and loyal fan base. And this movie version of that musical does seem to be getting a lot of praise from people, so I thought it was only right for me to give it a chance, even though I have little to no interest in it going in.
How can you not care?
Like this.
As far as the positives go, I will say that overall, as a standalone film, I do think that it's well made. From a technical standpoint, from a filmmaking standpoint, and even from an acting standpoint. I do think that it is competently made, even if I didn't necessarily personally connect with the story itself. And I will say that the last 15 minutes or so is easily the best part of the movie, both from a story and visual perspective. It's one of those types of finales that's pure spectacle, and I think it leaves the story in a place that could potentially set up a part 2 to go into some more interesting directions. In fact, it was the only time in the film that I personally felt something. Because in that moment, you are quite literally witnessing the literal creation of one of film's most iconic villains. We get pretty good explanations as to why certain aspects of that character exist. Everything from the flying monkeys to her iconic broom. My issue is that I don't necessarily like the path that we took to get there over the course of this almost 3-hour runtime.
It's been 84 years.
And the real question is, did it need to be that long? Isn't that a bit overindulgent? The original musical, according to Google, was around 2 hours and 45 minutes with a 15-minute intermission. Now you might be thinking to yourself that the runtime is pretty spot on. But not when you consider that this is only part 1 of the film adaptation. For all intensive purposes, they plan to stretch the runtime of the original story to almost double its length. So the question is, could they have cut things out of this movie to make it a bit more digestible, especially for people like myself? Did we really need so many musical numbers, most of which I completely checked out of? Did we really need a 10 to 15 minute makeover scene that pretty much amounted to nothing? Probably not. I get it, the entire narrative of the film is driven by the relationship between the Wicked Witch and Glinda. And scenes like the one that I'm talking about were intended to build that bond between them. But if I'm being brutally honest, I never really bought into their relationship anyway.
I don't get it.
Even when they go from adversaries to friends, it feels abrupt, which is a weird thing to say about a film that feels so drawn out. I think my biggest issue with this movie is that the characters do not 100% jive with what we know about their counterparts in the original film. I assume that Wicked is supposed to be a direct continuation of the 1939 original film, especially since the opening moments of this film very much insinuate that. So I just have a difficult time believing that the Wicked Witch, Glinda, the Wizard, and the location of Oz itself depicted in this movie are the same characters and locations from the original. Listen, we live in the age of sympathetic villains, and I understand that. And the results of that are writers always looking for the best in any character and trying to constantly explain why they are the way that they are. To me, it's a tired and played out trend, even before Wicked, that needs to die a miserable death.
Stop it!
The general question put forward by this film is, are you born wicked, or is that something that is instilled over you over time? Or in this film's case, you can just be framed to look wicked, even if deep down you are a good person. I don't know about anybody else, but the original Wicked Witch of the West never struck me as a misunderstood character. She really didn't strike me as an animal rights activist who was turned into an enemy of the state after she decided not to play ball. And for that reason alone, Wicked feels like it is injecting modern ideology into what was once a timeless story. The Wicked Witch in this film is portrayed as someone who has been mistreated from birth, all based on the way she looks. Subtle, isn't it?
Message!
But even through all the bigotry, prejudice, and bullying she experiences throughout the course of this film, she still comes out the other side looking like the only decent person in the land of Oz. And make no mistake about it, Oz in this film looks more corrupt and filled with assholes than our own modern society. It felt a lot like subverting expectations in the worst way possible. Taking what was established in the original film and just doing the exact opposite just because you can. Even when you look at Glinda as a character. Now don't get me wrong, I think Ariana Grande did a great job portraying the role. But she might be intentionally written to be the most unlikable character that I've seen in a movie all year. I mean, she's self-centered, she's egotistical, she's basically Oz's version of Rachel Zegler.
Yeah. Weird.
Don't get me wrong, there were a handful of moments where her entire personality made for some decent humor. But again, it just did not feel consistent with what we already know about Glinda. And that is jarring to someone like myself who again has no knowledge of Wicked prior to this. So to sum up, the characters who will eventually help Dorothy get to the Emerald City and get home, as well as the same character who spends most of the original film's runtime threatening Dorothy and her dog, somehow aren't who we thought they were and are actually the complete opposite. And I just wasn't buying it. Execution is everything. And like I said earlier in this video, I think if you take this film as a standalone story, yes, it is well made. But there were just too many contradictions for me personally from a character perspective to overlook all of them. I mean, the Munchkins in this film aren't even Munchkins, for God's sakes. They are just slightly smaller humans who actually don't look smaller at all in most scenes.
Why?
I think the general look of Oz as a location is spot on, and a lot of credit should go to the production design. I felt like that aspect of the film did look consistent, and it should be commended for it. The problem is that a lot of things elsewhere, for me personally, left something to be desired. I would not be surprised if a fan of the original musical came out and said that they absolutely loved the film, because they at least had somewhat of an idea what they were getting into. But as an outsider who is experiencing this story for the very first time, something just felt off about it from the very beginning. Through 90% of this film's runtime, I was almost completely checked out and bored, only for something somewhat visually impressive to pull me back in from time to time. Listen, Wicked is nice to look at, and it's definitely not the worst movie I've seen all year, not even close. But the truth is that I felt next to nothing while watching it, and that is the very definition of a careless Sam Gerard.
I don't care!
Y'all be cool. Right on.